Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and start the panel. Welcome back to this part of the conference. I wanted to make a note that unfortunately one of our guests, Guled Ismail, is not here currently. We don't. Hopefully he'll make it here for his workshop. He was the individual who was a refugee from Somalia who has been working with Lutheran Family Services and trying to assist refugees adjusting to life to Nebraska. So at this point in time, he is still not here, so hopefully he'll be here for the workshop. We're going to go ahead and go forward. The point of this panel was to try to kind of get some focus on a specific piece of what Christian talked about today, and that's the piece of adaptation when it comes to the actual immigrants, the actual refugees that are here in the United States and are coming to the United States. And what we were hoping to do is to have kind of an informal conversation about how we tackle that element of it. My colleague here, my comrade here, Gladys Godinez, is going to also be giving a workshop into some of her work, but I want to go ahead and we've invited Gladys and we've invited Guled because these are two individuals who are doing this kind of work day in and day out in central Nebraska to assist these people who are here that at least in part have come to this state because of the factors that Christian talked about earlier. So I want to go ahead and get started. I guess one add point, we all are aware of the O'Neill raids that happened within the last month or two. And these raids and the kind of ratcheting up of ICE presence in our state and in our communities. Those O'Neill raids, for those of you who are unfamiliar, involved 11 very different work sites. 133 people were caught up in them. Scores of families disrupted and separated just within the last month. So this is a conflict, a struggle, an issue that obviously is going to be continuing to be a prevalent one during these years of the Trump administration and the ratcheting up of deportation activities. So with that, what I want to start off with is to ask Gladys to maybe to introduce herself, maybe talk a little bit about her own migrant immigration experience, as well as maybe a little bit of the kind of work that she does on a day-to-day basis to, in essence, adapt, not necessarily to try to capture carbon, but to try to deal with the challenges of immigration, the challenges of refugees that we're dealing with here in our state. So I'll give the microphone to Gladys.
Thank you. First I want to say good morning, or good afternoon, so thank you very much for having me. My name is Gladys Godinez, and is it okay if I sit? Do you want me to stand? I want to give you stand. Okay.
Back there. All right.
Here I am. A little back row. So my name, I am the Executive Director of the Trinidad Center. I started that nonprofit a couple of years back when I first moved back to Nebraska. I'm also a community organizer for the Center for Rural Affairs. So I work both roles constantly, and I'm blessed that my employment also allows me to do Trinidad Center work as well. So my story, I was born in Guatemala City, Guatemala. I immigrated to the United States with my parents and my two older brothers at the age of 7. We immigrated to Inglewood, California. That's very much a high crime location in California. So we immigrated there. There was the LA riots, and I don't know if you remember that, but there was a lot of crime at that time. We had family members that were hurt at that time, and then we worked. My dad found a place here in Lexington, Nebraska, and it was IBP at the time. Now it's called Tyson, and he worked there for 20 to 25 years in Tyson, Texas. So my immigrant story is basically we moved here. We were seeking asylum. My dad got hijacked a couple of times because he was a truck driver, so crime rate in Guatemala was high at that time. We moved to Lexington because Inglewood was also a criminal location, so we moved to Lexington, Nebraska. We didn't have status. We applied for asylum status in 1989. My dad was granted a work permit, but for about 15 to 20 years, he didn't hear back from the immigration court system. So we're talking about 15 to 20 years of hearing back on an asylum case. And I'm not alone, you know, there's a lot of people that came during that wave of immigrants that came around 1988 and 1989. And I know that there was an earthquake a year before we immigrated. So, you know, maybe there's some correlation between the spike of crime, the earthquake. It was a high magnitude earthquake in Guatemala, and the reason why we immigrated to the United States. After a while, I was told at the age of 15 that the only way that I can get any kind of status was to get married to a U.S. citizen. And that's the worst thing you can tell a feminist. God knows I wasn't going to do that. So I did marry a citizen. Yes, thank you. But I did not file under my husband. So I am currently a DACA recipient. I'm still very active. DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. I wasn't a child when I arrived. And I'm able to have a work permit, hence why I'm able to work. But it is limited, right? So it's only 2-year work permit, and it's no longer active. So you have heard DACA in the news. I am one of those people. But you've also heard that they're trying to end it. So on their process of ending it, we have had a lot of awesome nonprofit legal services agencies that have been fighting for us. So for right now, DACA, whoever has a DACA or a work permit can reapply or renew for another one. But for our younger ones, the ones that didn't apply, they're still out there, very much in the shadows. And the shadows is no fun. It's just survival. So that's my immigrant story. Happily married. My husband understands the reason why I'm not claiming him, or he's not claiming me. And I hope that there is some sort of resolution in the future, and we will continue to fight for it. But it's not guaranteed. So we're fully aware, and we have safety plans in place, meaning that if DACA were to end, I may get deported, right? And what happens then? So we've looked at Canada, and we've looked at Guatemala to go back, but it is not ideal. I was raised here. Because I cry all the time. I feel as though I'm a Nebraskan, so I belong here, you know? So I've done a lot of work. I started a nonprofit. It's named after my grandmother. She's also undocumented. She was also undocumented. She passed away. She took care of us when we were little. So I think it was prudent to put her name as our center. We do immigrant advocacy, so I do a lot of DACA 101. I do a lot of Know Your Rights presentations and Immigration 101, based out of Lexington. And we also do GOTV work. So get out the vote is very important for us. Even though I cannot vote, I can encourage you to vote, so that my voice is still here. And we also do leadership development. And I think that's lacking within our Latino population as well as our immigrant population. And I think it's due to lack of education or bilingual education. So my goal is to make Lexington more welcoming. As you know, Lexington is 70% Latino, 10% African descent, mostly Somali. But we are not being represented at the top level. We're not getting representation at the city level, school board, or county level. So it is very important for us to kind of show, step in and say, hey, I would like a seat at the table. So it's very interesting trying to delve in and have those conversations with our community. So in addition, I am also the lead organizer for the response to the O'Neill raid. I did go to O'Neill the day of, and we did see families that were separated. We did see kids that were in the school without their parents, as young as 10 months old, and 8 days old, sorry. So it is heartbreaking. We still have families that have been separated. We have helped with a network, statewide network. We have helped 89 individuals obtain legal services. And I can tell you a whole story, but I'll tell you that if you come to the workshop, I have my my experience. I will share that with you while I'm there. I did think about immigration and climate change and how it correlates. And currently, there's something called TPS, Temporary Protective Status. And we have that. That's a form of relief for individuals so that they can come to the United States to seek, just asylum, basically, for a temporary time, because it's called Temporary Protective Status. So we have countries like El Salvador, Haiti, Nicaragua. All of those were affected by some sort of climate-induced situation, either earthquake or hurricane, and the United States gave them temporary protective status. The Trump administration has decided to no longer extend temporary protective status, specifically for our Salvadorian population. They've been here for 15 to 20 years, just as myself. And because that's getting shut down, now they're going to lose their work permit, and chances are, if tracked down by ICE, they will get deported as well. And the number for Salvador is 200,000 people. Okay. I tracked down the number for Honduras. They are also affected, 57,000, and Haiti, 50,000. And as you know, those countries are not developed, nor are they ready to accept these populations. So, we do see the effects of climate change, the fact that we were welcomed at once, but now we're getting kicked out. So that's my summary, and then I'm open for questions.
All right, thank you very much, Gladys. So I guess this question I wanted to relate it to Gladys' story, which we know is a story that is shared by millions of others in our country. I was curious from Christian's vantage point in terms of that piece of adaptation. I mean, I don't know, obviously I know your reaction to what's happening with the Trump administration, and Mark is telling me to stand up. I know what's happening. I know your reaction in terms of the Trump administration and the kind of reactionary politics that's being pursued, but I guess in a longer term sense, these people are coming. One of my colleagues has expressed this to me multiple times, that we know that millions will be coming to our country in large part because of maybe climate-induced factors. And we do know already that people who are living on our coastlines are going to be moving more and more to the interior as sea levels rise. What's your reaction, or how do we adapt to that type of situation when you're thinking about immigration, when you think about internal immigration in the United States, or even on an international level? Yeah.
Well, do I have to stand up? You know I will, right? I'll stand up. Well, immigration there's push factors and pull factors in the immigration of people. And the push factors that drive people out of their countries, once again, generally track back to direct foreign investment and U.S. military intervention. So, to the extent that our government is creating policies that drive people away, that needs to be dealt with here. I will stand up. It's you. But why in Central America, it was U.S. funded counterinsurgency plays a big role in why these crime waves. His counterinsurgency. So in other words, I don't have any good kind of instrumentalists like these are the 3 policy things we need to do now. But from a larger perspective, this is what I think and what we need to do. So counterinsurgency destroys the social fabric and I deal with this in Tropic of Chaos, because counterinsurgency is a form of warfare that's about controlling populations, not controlling territory. The government already controls territory in these insurgent situations. And so the methodology that is used is about attacking the social fabric to try and break the resistance in El Salvador, in Guatemala, Honduras. The U.S. pursued this, and it involved torture. It involved developing auxiliary forces. Frequently in Guatemala, there's infamously the civil patrols. So part of the way that 100,000 people were killed in the counterinsurgency campaign against the guerrillas in Guatemala. And one of the tactics that was used was classic counterinsurgency was, go in and burn over 400 villages in northern Guatemala were burnt to the ground, and their population sent running towards the Mexican border, and then eventually captured and resettled in kind of like re-education camps. I went and traveled through there. I spent a lot of time in Guatemala many years ago. One of the first places I ever did any journalism was there when I was very young. And so then they would turn people into these auxiliaries to fight with the military, the civil patrols. And they would force the civil patrols to act against their community. So what I'm getting at is that the method of warfare itself attacks the social fabric. Right? Then the military expanded, partly due to huge support from the U.S. More and more indigenous guys from rural communities were, press ganged into the military often. And in the military, they also had their connections to their communities pulverized and changed, because often they were sent back to fight against these communities. In the name of fighting communist guerrillas, they were sent to burn down villages that were just like the ones they were from, or might have even been sometimes the ones they were from, right? And so as a result, they're totally traumatized and generally don't go back to the villages to increase urbanization. So what counterinsurgency does by attacking the social fabric is introduce anomie, right? Normlessness, lack of connections. And that helps generate crime, and that's what produces a kind of crimogenic situation. And there's also the deportations after, just sticking with the Central American case, right? After the Rodney King rebellion, there was mass deportations down to Central America, and that's where these American-produced gangs like Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, and the 18th Street Gang took root in Central America because of these deportations. And they were the product of America's own political economy and geography of racism and relative deprivation, social inequality, right? Gangs formed. A lot of the famous gangs in California formed out of Catholic social clubs from the 40s and 50s, and they were about kids in an increasingly hostile world where there wasn't decent work for them, in schools that were increasingly overcrowded thanks to Proposition 13, which gutted California schools, in a state where there was a tradition of white supremacist law enforcement that then, beginning in the 1980s, is starting to receive massive amounts of federal funding. Just vast amounts of money start flowing through the war on drugs down to these local communities. And that's what produces the kind of the pathology of gang violence. And then it was just exported by the U.S. government. So in terms of like push factors, counterinsurgency is a major push factor, right? If we want to not create traumatized places where people are fleeing fanaticism of the ethnic or religious variety, fleeing crime, then we need to not have a foreign policy that has as one of its centerpieces counterinsurgency. That's all about attacking the social fabric. And we've been doing that in Iraq and Afghanistan now for, unbelievably to think, like 17 years. Is that what it is in Afghanistan? So being aware of some of those push factors. Also direct foreign investment and the restructuring that I mentioned in my talk earlier. Right? This weakens the states in these sending countries. If the ideology is that no, what you must do is defund your public schools, reduce all your tariffs, allow in cheap imports, deindustrialize, sell off your state assets, then you're going to have a political economy that's much more prone to boom and bust cycles, much more unequal, and a government that's really incapable of dealing with social problems. Also, the U.S. is in the lead in pushing against any kind of redistributive developmentalist policies. A number of years ago, I was in Rwanda, and Rwanda is an interesting place. It's landlocked. It's gone through 3 different genocides, and it has these ex-socialist type characters in charge. Paul Kagame, he gets tons of crap in the U.S. press, and you got to wonder why. Why are they picking on this guy? I mean, isn't there someone just like him in like one of the other countries that that we could all know his name and be concerned about how he's running his country. But the real reason is not that Paul Kagame is a great guy and there are no problems in Rwanda, but they use state power in Rwanda in a developmental fashion. Plastic bags are a major problem throughout much of the world. They embed in the soil and they prevent the water from penetrating. So in Rwanda, they banned plastic bags, and they're very serious about it. And Paul Kagame wanted to run a 3% budget deficit so as to fund free public education up to grade 12. And the Rwandan government would say, look, you can't expect us to develop if we have farmers who can't read fertilizer bags. You know, how are we going to improve agriculture if no one can read? So we need to do this. 3% budget is nothing, right? The IMF, under pressure from the U.S., like, no, you have to run balanced budgets only, balanced budgets. You have debts to pay. You profligate little landlocked African country. How dare you go into debt to educate your people? So those kinds of policies that rich countries, and particularly our country, push have to be challenged. And I know you all are, but that's one thing that needs to be done in terms of, like, why are people forced to leave their homes? Because their homes are being bombed, or because, you know, paramilitary forces are coming in and torturing people and getting family members just, you know, rat on each other, whatever. In terms of the pull factors, you know, people should look at, I think part of the argument about easing up on immigrants is, like, getting real about what immigration does for this country. It's a net gain. The Economist magazine, right? You know, pretty conservative magazine, consistently good on immigration. It's like they always point to the U.S. as, look, why is the U.S. growing more than Europe? Part of it has to do with immigration. There was just a study that I read about in the FT that found that immigrants to the U.S. are twice as likely as native-born people to start businesses. So immigrants bring a lot to the U.S. Mike Davis, who is he's a great historian, and he's written a number of books. He's most famous for City of Quartz, which is a book about the history of Los Angeles that came out, like, right before the LA riots. And one of his many books is called Magical Urbanism. And it's about what immigration, primarily from Latin America, has done for the Midwest, and particularly dying little towns in the Midwest. And then, you know, lots of them have been revived by Latin American immigrants coming in and, you know, taking jobs that the Americans don't want to take, saving money, turning dilapidated houses into, like, little oases. I have a friend who is the wife of a very close friend of mine who's in the exact same situation. He was in the U.S., been in the U.S. for, like, I don't know, like 15 years, and was up in, you know, was in 100 miles of the Michigan northern border on vacation with his family, and some cop pulled him over, some local cop, and then began this nightmare, and he's headed for deportation, but he's done like half a year in detention and like a year with the ankle bracelet on, just this constant bullying and humiliation, and now he's out, and for the first time he actually has, under probably similar kind of temporary the program you're mentioning. So he's got like 2 years to work, and he's like started a carpet installing business, et cetera, and you know, I use this guy just as one example, but I mean, we need to point these things out to people. Like, he saves his money, you know, pools money, he can't get a loan from a bank, buys some condemned crack house in the worst part of Kalamazoo, uses his own sweat equity after working all day, and turns this place into this wonderful little oasis. I mean, this is happening all over the country, where immigrants are taking dilapidated pieces of property and turning them into places that anyone would want to live, right? So people need to be reminded of what immigrants do when they get here, right? Pay lots of taxes. It's, you know, I forget, I don't have the latest estimates on this, but it's, you know, vast amounts of taxes are paid by immigrants into Social Security that they never, by undocumented immigrants, that they never then claim because they're undocumented. So these kinds of subsidies that immigrants pay to our economy need to be pointed out. And I think that the key thing is that, of course, the employers who use immigrants want to have it both ways. They want immigrants, and they want those immigrants to be terrified, right? And the way you keep immigrants terrified is to gin up this discourse of getting them out, you know. But it's really, what it's really about is about keeping them here and keeping them absolutely terrorized so that they never ask for an increase in wages. Remittances are another important thing we should be talking about. More important than all the development money that states give, and certainly the development money that foundations give, most of which is wasted on consultants who got degrees from, fancy universities. Remittances, the money that immigrants send back from the U.S., but also from Europe to their home countries, is very important in development in those countries, because you don't have these middlemen. You don't have these my personal animosity about this certain type of do-gooder chattering class is coming up, but you don't have these specialists demanding that everybody do yet another workshop about this or that. It's just like money to the family. It's like, okay, so now we can build that other addition on the house. Well, that's like, that's somebody else's job. That means the guy who sells bricks and the people who make bricks are like, okay, yeah, we'll sell you the bricks. So remittances that immigrants send home are really important for development in immigrant sending countries. They do more for development in those countries than all of our official efforts, which are generally mostly jobs programs for upper middle class white people who want it both, who want to have a nice job and also want to do good, right? There's a certain class person who isn't happy just going and working in the corporate sector and selling widgets. They also want to be able to have cocktail parties, be smug, like, I'm helping them in my program. It's like, really, if you want to help, just get out of the way and make it easier for people who prepared your meal and gutted the chickens to send home a portion of their paychecks to their families. In terms of what we should be demanding here, I really think there's got to be a firewall between cops and ICE. That's something that can be pushed at the local level because local police are accountable to local authorities. I also think there are too many cops in this country. There's just there needs to be less police. The police where I spend half my time is right across the border from where I'm from, Vermont, which is very kind of laissez-faire. The left laissez-faire. Vermont, there's all stuff you don't have to get licensed for. You can drive your car without insurance. In Massachusetts, on the other hand, the place is crawling with state police, who had just came out last week when there was a big gas explosion. Some brilliant cop took a screenshot of his computer screen to show the locations of the fires, and then people noticed on the tabs up top, it was like they were keeping surveillance on all these left-wing groups in Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is crawling the state police. They have nothing to do. They pull people over, they harass people, including occasionally college professors. So enough, they need austerity. Too many cops, and they need to be forced not to participate and not cooperate with ICE. And that's actually happening. The friend of mine who I just mentioned, who's the brother-in-law of this guy, he's actually just got elected to the Kalamazoo City Council, and they're pushing for that. And I think they've achieved it so that their cops are not allowed to cooperate with ICE. So that's very important. And getting stories like yours into the news. I think we saw evidence of how powerful this is when even our president was forced to say, yeah, well, the DACA kids, they're very sympathetic, they're very compelling. This guy who's totally arrogant, totally impervious, had no problem just rejecting any fact that he doesn't like. Even he was affected. He's like, I love kids. It's like, I think there's a lot of people like that. And there's also, my in-laws in Kentucky are all right-wing Christian fundamentalists, hardcore right-wing Christian fundamentalists. They're nice people, but they're messed up politics. And their daughter was not different politics. But one of these guys, an uncle, said, he runs a contracting business and a farm, and he's always going on about welfare and this and that, and how no one wants to work. And then it's like, he started talking, like, yeah, where are you having these problems with? And it's like, well, it's like white people in Kentucky with drug problems don't want to get up at 5 in the morning and go dig ditches, build bridges. I'm like, yeah, who does work out like that? Who do you find is good? It's like, oh, really, Mexicans and Salvadorians? Yeah, They work really hard. Oh, that's interesting. It's like, this guy's politics, if you get him in the infant level, it's like, what's going on here? It can't be both. You can't be like, these guys work really hard and they're great and I couldn't run my business without them, you know? Or which one is it? Is it like close the borders or is it run your business? Because if you close the borders, you're really going to have to start dealing with the drug addicts, you know? The white drug addicts. Nothing against white drug addicts. And then in terms of protests, you know, in pressuring protests, it's like, I think it's important to like lobby and educate, but we have to have a good cop, bad cop thing too, right? It's like lobbying, educating, but also jamming up the political class, blocking the offices, saying no, going to their houses. And that's how net neutrality under Obama was defended. I thought it was a brilliant example of disruption getting the goods. They went right for, I forget his name now, but the head of the FCC at the time. And they like blockaded his driveway, they camped out in front of his office, and this guy did a 180 on the question of net neutrality. He was going to get rid of it, and then he came out as a supporter of it. And it was because they weren't like boycotting the telecommunications companies that wanted this, that was then somehow, no, they went for not only the agency, they went for the guy in charge. You know, they made his name a household name, even though I'd forgotten it. So, and then in terms of like institutions to engage with, right? Unions, local government, churches, I think these are points of purchase where we can start making arguments about why we need to have firewalls between the cops and ICE, why we need less policing. Those are also venues frequently where one will deal with people who have a kind of confusion or cognitive dissonance about these issues, and I think would be very open to changing their minds when confronted by the reality, the human reality of what, you know, this deportation policy looks like.
Thank you, Christian. So I wanted to ask Gladys, Christian made references to immigrants actually saving towns, rehabilitating towns, and for her to maybe give maybe some examples from here in Nebraska where that has taken place. And if she could, what efforts, if any, are happening or have happened in terms of us trying to get local governments, local authorities to not cooperate with ICE, maybe even push back against ICE working with the police. Because to the extent that I think we all know, I mean, ICE can't do its job. Like, they don't have the resources to get at the 11 million plus undocumented immigrants on their own. They require the cooperation of state authorities. They require the cooperation of local authorities and cops in order to achieve whatever that objective of clearing out our population of undocumented immigrants. So that piece of cooperation is really a crucial one. So, Gladys, if you could just speak a bit about those two questions.
Okay, regarding economy, I can just give you my personal example, but you could probably see it throughout rural Nebraska. I know in Lexington, Nebraska, we have, our downtown is made up of Latino and African storefronts and different businesses that we have started. So we do have the entrepreneurial spirit. We want to contribute to the United States economy, and we continuously do. And it's not only Lexington. In O'Neill, when I was there, I was surprised they have a Salvadorian / Guatemalan store there. And I was like, O'Neill, Nebraska, what are you doing here? You know? And then I started realizing, hey, there's a large Latino population obviously that was affected directly, but also that have lived there for a very long time. We have Crete, Nebraska, that's largely Latino population as well. South Sioux City, Grand Island, as you know, we have a whole street there. So we do have that spirit. We do contribute to the economy. One of the towns or cities that I know for sure are doing their best to embrace their diversity in the businesses is Columbus. So Columbus has worked their butts off to be able to integrate the Latino businesses and the white businesses together and have networking breakfasts together, and those you see 25 to 30 business owners in those breakfast meetings, and they, all different colors. So that's a beautiful sight, and I congratulate Columbus if anybody is from Columbus here. There you go. We can only hope, that other cities and towns also kind of replicate what we're doing in Columbus, that would be great. And then regarding police state and ICE. During the O'Neill raid, all you see was state patrol cars. And I don't know if you saw it or not, but that means Nebraska signed up for this, right? Us as a state, we signed up for it. We said, okay, sure, let's go. And from my understanding, they were there not only that day, but a couple of days after, harassing Latino and Hispanic drivers. So, State Patrol, it's on your list, write them a letter. And then also the police. So there's a thing called 287G, which is a program, and I'll go into detail in the workshop, but it's a program where county officials can sign up and say, hey, ICE, we're collaborating with you. We'll detain people, we'll ask them immigration questions, and they would have that right to, because they would be working under ICE. So we have one county that has signed up for such a thing, and that's Dakota County. So we're talking about South Sioux City, which is a largely Latino population there. So that is saddening. ACLU of Nebraska has been fighting that since the very beginning, or rumors of starting that program. So we do know that we're trying to fight it. We don't know how to successfully do it when people think it's for the greater good. You know, I think the disruption piece, the rally, those can help so much, and we definitely welcome them because we need the noise. But we also need you guys at the city council meetings, we need you at the county commissioners meetings, we need you to start speaking up on behalf of your neighbors and to tell your officials that those type of programs are not welcomed in Nebraska. And if I may.
Go ahead.
We did talk about Medicaid and stamps and, you know, public benefits. There is a rule coming up that is not set yet, but it's called public charge. And what that will do to, there's already a fear of it. It's not even here, and it's already in the news. This will probably be really bad, or it is bad, for all individuals that have applied for food stamps, Medicaid, like the parents of citizen children that need food stamps to feed their citizen children, or WIC recipients because they need the milk or the cereal. Those individuals are now getting traumatized or re-traumatized because there is a policy that's coming up. It's called public charge. Look into it, please. There will be, it's not set yet, but it will be open for public comments on a federal level, and it is necessary for us to speak on behalf of them. In O'Neill specifically, I know I had 2 individuals that were pregnant at the time of their arrest, and they didn't have Medicaid, they didn't have insurance. And as you can imagine, that's a big issue when you're pregnant. So we did ask them to apply for Medicaid so that they can have insurance. But the first thing they said is, Gladys, I don't want it to affect my immigration case. So at this moment, it is in the Latino news channels. We are aware of it, and it is currently scaring a lot of people. And they're getting themselves off of Medicaid, getting themselves off of WIC, and getting themselves off of all of those public services that they need for their citizen children. So just be aware of that.
So what is public charge? What does it do?
It basically takes away any kind of relief of deportation. So if I'm claiming to be, if I want to apply for a status, and Brian, if you could, I don't know if you want to jump in or not, but if I want to apply for a status, and I say, yes, I have received public benefits, then my application may be denied due to me applying for some sort of public benefit.
We only have about 10 minutes left. I don't know if Christian, you wanted to add any more points.
No, I guess one last thing I'd say also, you know, the condition of labor, you know, all working people in this country is always present in this discussion, right? This is like something we can't forget, right? Why are a lot of people are on public benefits in this country? Why is that? You know, well, it's because in large part a lot of companies won't give people full-time work, right? Bernie Sanders has recently floated the idea of charging Amazon for the subsidies that we pay to it by providing public benefits for the workers that it exploits and refuses to give full-time work to, right? So all like the Amazon Walmart, all these companies do this. They put people on 28 hours a week, maybe they'll go up to 32 a little bit. They're never going to go to 40 hours a week. I think the threshold is 35, where then you have your full-time employee and they have to pay benefits. So, I mean, they're gaming the system. These huge profitable companies are gaming the system, and they're shifting the burden of the cost of the reproduction of their workforce to the taxpayer. They should pay people wages, right? If wages went up and if the hours were expanded, right, if people were allowed to work full-time and get benefits, then this whole question of public benefits, which is not that, it's not really a huge problem for our economy, but is certainly a right-wing talking point, And so I think we need to drive right at that. It's like, yeah, you're concerned about public benefits. Well, let's talk about these welfare cheating companies.
Okay. At this point, we've got about 11 minutes to go, and I was wondering if there's anyone in the audience that had a question for either of our panelists that perhaps kind of addresses this issue of immigration, or how we as a community, as a state, should adapt to the current reality of having immigrants in our state, undocumented, documented, and the expectation, anticipation that this is only going to become perhaps more significant as climate, weather patterns change, and other factors that Christian talked about are perhaps pushing people to leave and come to the U.S. Yes, sir.
I wonder if Professor Frankie could comment on, there was recently a raid in O'Neill, Nebraska, and they arrested like 100 people, and about 20 were coyotes and exploiting. In other words, they were working in that area for the different businesses. It's valuable, they have jobs, but they're being exploited. And how would you comment on that? Because it's kind of mixed, because, they are employed, they're sending money back to Guatemala, Mexico, but they're also being really heavily exploited by, the different companies that take their money and change their money. How can you deal with that? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
How do you deal with the parasitic interests that prey upon immigrants, essentially?
Right.
Well, I think that, again, it comes back to this idea of empowering people. Like, people are vulnerable to this sort of exploitation when they don't have rights, right? If you are afraid of driving your car, you're going to be less engaged with all institutions. If you're afraid of being caught up in paperwork and deported because you try to open a bank account or something, right? So immigrants have to have rights so that they can get away from the exploited check cashers and, rip-off landlords and whatever, and also so that they can bid up wages, right? The entire working class needs the immigrant portion of the working class to have the power to bid up wages, either informally by saying, you know what, I'm going to quit this job because this is outrageous, I won't work for this, especially when the economy is booming, or formally by getting involved with unions and saying, yeah, well, we're going to go on strike until they raise our wages. So the entire working class needs the whole body of workers in this country has to have the same set of rights if the struggle to raise the condition of living is to have any traction and success. So I think that's what I would say, that it all comes back to this idea of giving people rights. That, and what I think people don't get is it's like, or the right wingers, it's like there's this idea that we're on the way, that these conditions aren't perfect. We're on the way towards a solution, right? Which is, immigration reform or mass roundups or this or that. And it's like, it has to be pointed out, it's like, no, we're not on the way to anything. This is the condition. This is the condition, and it's been like